All right, today we're tackling a really big idea from the book, The Technological Republic. The core argument? It's pretty provocative. It says Silicon Valley has completely lost its way, and because of that, it's actually putting the entire Western world in danger. So let's unpack that. And the book just kicks the door down with this line. It's not pulling any punches. This is a direct shot at the entire tech industry. The argument is that its ambition has just shrunk. It's gone from this grand vision of changing the world to, well, basically just trying to capture our attention for a few more seconds. Okay, so here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll dig into a side of Silicon Valley's history that you've probably never heard. Then, we'll look at how everything shifted to consumer tech. We'll explore the cultural void that left behind, which leads us right into today's AI arms race. And finally, we'll see what the book actually proposes we do about it, how to rebuild this so-called technological republic. All right, let's jump into our first section, Silicon Valley's forgotten history. Now, the story we all know, right? The one about startups and garages and brilliant disruptive founders. Well, the book argues that story conveniently leaves out the single most important player in the whole thing, the government. I mean, look at this. This completely flips the script on how Silicon Valley was born. We're not talking about building a better social media app here. This was about national necessity. Rockets, satellites, the groundwork for the internet and GPS. The federal government, the CIA, the Navy, they weren't just customers buying a product. They were the driving force, the partners pushing for huge leaps in technology for national security. And this right here really nails the central contrast the book is drawing. You see this massive pivot. Technology went from being part of this grand project, something with a shared national purpose, to an era where the consumer is king. The goal completely shifted to just satisfying our individual wants, our fleeting right now desires. So you have to ask, right? What happened? How did we get from point A to point B? The book says it was a perfect storm of economic shifts and a major change in where our best and brightest people decided to go. Okay, so a huge piece of the puzzle was money. Look at defense spending. It fell off a cliff as a percentage of the whole economy. And what does that mean? Well, those gigantic government projects, the ones that basically built early Silicon Valley, they started to dry up. So the industry had to look for a new customer, a new market to sell to. And it wasn't just about government contracts. At the exact same time, look at where the talent was going. The smartest people in the country started flowing in a totally new direction. In '71, just 6% of Harvard grads went into finance or consulting. Fast forward to 2007, and that number is a staggering 47%. The top talent was just being vacuumed away from public projects and straight into the private market. But this wasn't just about money or choosing a different career. The book argues that something much deeper was going on. This was really about a massive cultural shift, a kind of retreat from big collective ideas and national goals. And to describe this new generation of builders, the book comes up with this fantastic term, technological agnostics. Think about it. These are engineers and founders who are brilliant at what they do. Their passion is the act of creation itself, just building cool new stuff. But, and this is the key, it's totally disconnected from any bigger worldview, any grand political project, any national mission. They're just building for the sake of building. To really drive this point home, the authors bring in this quote from the philosopher Michael Sandel. And it's powerful. The idea is that when our public conversation stops wrestling with big moral questions, it doesn't just go away. It creates a vacuum, a moral void. And what rushes in to fill that void? The market. But it doesn't fill it with purpose. It fills it with, well, with trivial things. Okay, so this is where it all comes to a head. All of this history, this focus on the trivial, the book argues it has led us to a moment of real danger. It's left the West completely exposed in what might be the single most important technological race in history, the race for AI. And the authors frame the stakes with this really blunt question. This isn't just about who builds the next great app. They're saying AI is the defining technology for the global power struggle of the 21st century, full stop. The next major conflict, they argue, isn't going to be won with tanks or ships. It's going to be won or lost with software. So, while people in the West are having these endless debates, the book points out that our adversaries aren't waiting, they're acting. It gives concrete examples of how China is already using AI for state surveillance and, maybe more alarmingly, pouring resources into military tech like autonomous drone swarms. We're talking about technology that could completely change the face of warfare. So, what's the answer? Well, this is probably the book's most controversial take. The authors argue that all the calls to pause or slow down AI development are just wrong, dangerously wrong. They say the West absolutely must build these so-called sharp tools, because if we shy away from it out of fear, you can be sure our adversaries won't. Okay, so that's the diagnosis. It's pretty bleak. But what's the cure? The book doesn't just tear everything down. It actually ends with a really ambitious plan, a call to action for how to rebuild what it calls the technological republic. And it's a pretty clear three-step plan. Step 1. The tech world needs to end its self-imposed exile and start working with the government again. Step 2. They call for a new Manhattan Project, but this time for battlefield AI, to make sure the US and its allies stay ahead. And Step 3, and this is a big one, the engineering elite, the builders, have a duty to help shape and define a new national purpose, to help answer that fundamental question, what are we even building all this for? And that really brings us to the final, incredibly provocative question at the very heart of this book. It leaves all of us with a really tough dilemma to chew on. In this new world, with these incredibly new technological threats, do we have to choose? Must the West choose between its most deeply held liberal values and its very survival? It's a huge question, and that's the challenge the book leaves us with.